Lovely. So thank you for asking me to talk about the subject of truly local. This is an issue that's really close to my heart. Local activism has actually shaped the person I am today. So I moved to Sheffield around about 15 years ago, and I consider this city very much my home. I've put roots down here, and it's where I've lived for longer than anywhere else. In the time that I've lived here, my life has changed quite dramatically because when I arrived, I was a landscape photographer, I was freelance, I was quite active, I was dealing with chronic illness already, but I was managing it around running my business. And life, I thought I'd cracked life and had it sorted. But unfortunately, my health actually declined sort of post age of 30. And it caused me to reflect on what I actually wanted from the future of my life. And it wasn't traveling all over the world, it was actually being involved in my community. So this caused me to change direction, and I trained as a landscape architect at the University of Sheffield. However, once again, unfortunately, chronic illness did get in the way. And although I finished the course, I got to the point where I was so physically depleted that I didn't have really much left to give. And unfortunately for me, what that meant was, because at that point, this was pre-diagnosis of having multiple sclerosis, what this actually meant was that I just retreated from the world for a bit. So despite my ambitions to actually give more to my community, I found myself more socially isolated than ever. So I managed to finish my course, disappeared into myself for a while, and was kind of watching the world through the lens of social media, really, as you do, and watching the news and feeling quite disconnected. And then the tree campaign really started going. So the campaign to defend Sheffield street trees was started around about the end of 2016. And this was a point where I was at a particularly low ebb because I hadn't worked for 2 years, and I convinced myself that I didn't really have anything to give back. So this is one of the reasons I'd really retreated. But here's the thing, the outrage that I felt at how our city was managing the replacement of trees, so felling perfectly healthy trees in order to replace them with younger ones, really cut through all my reservations about my ability to be involved and actually make any kind of meaningful change. Because the thing that set me off in particular was that I'm a strong believer in community consultation, and a whole section of street trees on a street just 2 or 3 minutes around the corner from me was felled, and the first I knew about it was after it had happened, and I was beside myself. I was so angry and so upset. And so this had this profound motivating effect that actually cut through all the walls that I'd built up around myself, or at least started to break them down. And there's something about being in the position that I was, where I felt like I had nothing to owe anybody, I had no job to worry about, I was a free agent, and that's profoundly liberating. And at first, as many people do, you start off by being a keyboard warrior. I use that expression advisedly, but I felt that that was where I could be really involved. I could draw on my academic experience, my landscape architect training, to try and be the voice of reason, because it was an emotional situation. Everything was very fraught. And the idea was to just try and make sure that, the worst accusations on both sides were addressed, because lots of falsehoods were flying around at times. And also just to constantly refer back to best practice and national policy guidelines, and just be the critical friend that the council needed. So this went on for a little while, and then in February 2017, I found myself in a very interesting moment in time, because I turned up on Chipping House Road in Neveredge, where the police were leading a very heavy-handed operation to remove various tree defenders from that street. And it got heated, and it was a very surreal experience, because there I was facing down the police inspector and saying, various things about the right to walk down a pavement, and why was it that we were being asked to move consistently further and further away from the tree so that we couldn't defend it, and talked about the right to peaceful protest, all while I was suffering from an MS relapse that was quite badly affecting my right hand side. So it was this weird paradoxical situation where I was feeling physically awful, but I was actually involved and, awake to something new. So in that week, I was there for 3 out of the 5 days, because every time I spent a day there, I was so exhausted and emotionally overwhelmed that I'd then take a day off, and then I couldn't help but go back. So I was there for 3 out of 5 days that week. And it was chaotic, but it was kind of instrumental, and new alliances were formed in that particular period. For many months after that, there was a really good peaceful strategy to stand directly underneath trees and just refuse to move. And this actually worked very well for me because luckily I speak the language of trees, so I could be quite friendly with the arbs and talking about them, what they do, and kind of appeal to their better natures, those that had them. So, it was a relatively unconfrontational situation, and, I helped diffuse that. And this was good because it just meant all I had to do was stand there. And this meant that I did save dozens of trees, most of which are still standing, I'm pleased to say. And what this showed me is that I was just one person under a massive tree with a whole group of, because they were all men, all the arborists I came across, who were standing around me in a ring, and I wasn't moving. I was just stood there going, yeah, this is me, this is what I'm doing, and I'm not going anywhere. So I'd gone from feeling quite small and insignificant to actually quite powerful in a quite short space of time. The important thing is I knew that I was making a positive difference. People were telling me that my efforts were appreciated. I built new alliances with people in parts of Sheffield that I hadn't even visited before. And importantly, my horizons were broadened while I was doing this. So the situation did become more serious ultimately because felling tactics changed, and that meant that if I was to enter what was described as a work zone around a tree, the chances are, even if I had been able to get over one of the Harris fences, which are big metal fences that are tied together, if I'd managed to get over it, which I might have been able to do on a good day, then I would have faced the security on the other side. And the idea of being roughly handled by security wasn't really for me, unfortunately. And if I'd even got into the tree, I would have had to stay put for hours. And if you've got MS and a dodgy bladder, that's just not even an option. So other considerations at this time as well was that if I did get arrested, I feared for my health if I was locked up in a police cell for hours on end. They're not comfortable, they're not particularly warm. And yeah, the ultimate threat was I feared losing my home because people were being taken to court and there was a threat of seizing their assets. And my only asset is my home, and I couldn't lose that. So this meant that I stepped back from that sort of more direct role and started helping people by being a scout effectively and just watching for activity. So it was, one of my roles was to observe various vehicles as they were coming and going, seeing what kind of felling equipment they might have them on them, whether they were bringing barriers, all that kind of stuff. And then we'd get on the Jungle Telegraph, WhatsApp and various other messenger groups to warn people what was coming. And on occasion, I just simply put myself in the road and refused to let them pass. And sometimes that worked. Other times they did try and run me over. So it had mixed results. But ultimately, I couldn't even do this for a long period of time because when it's very cold, it's very difficult to stand still, in my experience. So I can walk about in the cold, no problem. But if I stand still, I seize up. And I got some really bad spasticity in my legs. So that was the end of that. So I once again went back to campaigning online. And I really want to make a point about this because the people who, effectively are in the limelight get all the attention. They're the ones who, put themselves in harm's way, and they, for better or for worse, they get a lot of attention. And this kind of ignores the massive support network of invisible people that work behind the scenes. And I think you can commit your time at all different levels in activism, and to be able to just do it at your own pace from the safety of your own home, from the comfort of your nice comfy chair with a computer in front of you, should not be underestimated. So that's why I use the word keyboard warrior advisedly. I actually have a lot of respect for people who take the time to talk to other people and educate them about, what is right and ways they can help their community. So because I was always careful to base my criticisms in fact, it's actually turned out to be a really good thing for me, because I now do work with the council. I have worked very closely with the Parks and Countryside Department, particularly the Woodlands team, to deliver walks around the city, tree walks. And this is partly through the Sheffield Woodland Connections Tree Charter branch that I set up. And that continues to this day. But I've also recently taken on a position for doing advocacy for urban agriculture. None of these experiences would have come about if I hadn't have been actively involved in the campaign, because people know who I am, they know my face, and sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not such a good thing. But what I've managed to build is a reputation of being somebody who is an activist, but also a relatively reasonable person, somebody that you can work with, somebody that you can talk with. most importantly, it's been the professional and personal relationships that I've built up caring for Sheffield's natural assets, because that's what's allowed me to launch the career that I have now. And I couldn't have imagined that when I started, committing my time to the campaign at the beginning of 2017. And it's really powerful how much it's brought me out of my social isolation and made me feel like I can actually contribute to my community. I can't really stress just how transformative it has been. It's been a powerful force for good in my life, not without its complications, but mostly very good. And I found that carrying on, being really active and being honest about my health needs as I talk to people, and being, allowing people to see my vulnerabilities has actually been a very good thing. And some of the projects that I work with volunteers, and I create safe spaces so people can talk about their mental health and things, that the other situations that concern them in their everyday life. And being able to share your private story and show that you're just like everybody else, it helps build community, and really importantly, it helps be a catalyst for important conversations to take place.